Nigerians. This is Firecrackers. We are live in New Zealand in just a moment, where a PhD candidate is standing by to speak with us. If you can have that on the screen. And then we also we have Professor Patrick Okedinachi Utomi. He's a professor of political economy. He joins us, of course, via Zoom tonight. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Wisdom Oyeke Polo from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. We'd like to thank you most kindly for agreeing to speak with Galaxy TV. And of course, Professor Patrick Utomi here in Nigeria. He's also the CEO and founder of Center for Values in Leadership. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us tonight. We will get your views in just a moment, Prof, and the PhD candidate in New Zealand in just a moment. But let's take a look at that clip, which has generated so much controversy here in Nigeria and, of course, in the diaspora. This is Firecrackers. Let's get things started.
Re-energizing and reorganizing the security apparatus and personnel of the armed forces and the police with a view to enhance their capacity to engage, push back, and dismantle the operations of both internal and external extremists and criminal groups waging war against our communities in some parts of the country. In line with the current security challenges we are facing as a nation, I would like to reiterate the promise I made recently when over 300 of our boys abducted from Government Science Secondary School, Kankara, were successfully rescued by our security operatives. The professionalism shown by our security forces and the collaboration from all stakeholders across both state and federal governments that led to the successful rescue of the boys is proof that Nigeria has the internal capacity to decisively deal with terror attacks on our citizens. However, we recognize that we rapidly have to move to a more proactive and preemptive posture to ensure that these sorts of traumatic incidents do not become a norm. Our administration is fully aware of the responsibility we have to protect the lives and property of all Nigerians, and we will not relent in learning and adapting to changing threats to our national security and civic well-being. On economy,
well, thank you for staying with us. This is Firecrackers. So there you have it, Mr. President there with his New Year message for 2021. That has generated a lot of talking points. It dominated most of the political stories last week, and we definitely have to zero in on that particular speech. Let's begin the conversation here in Lagos with Professor Pat Utomi. Prof, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with Galaxy TV. I'd like to thank you especially for investing so much in this nation in terms of the sacrifices you have made for Nigeria. But let's begin with Mr. President's speech. What do you make of the President's speech at this time when it does appear that in 2020, Professor Patrick, Nigeria and of course most of the countries around the world went through a whole lot If we can have Professor Patrick on the screen, please.
Inviting me. I'd like to say, first of all, that I do not like to spend a lot of time on speeches that are, if you will, like in football, that are set pieces. These speeches are made for a purpose. The idea is to convince people about some way of moving forward and all of that. So the speech of itself has pretty little significance for me as someone who is looking at performance. It is expected that a speech will be made. Could, of course, be more inspiring, but that's not his style. He's not an inspiring speaker, you know, so you've got to rule out whether or not his speech inspires. You know, there are different kinds of leadership style. His is not to be the person who inspires. It's not his style. He doesn't have the capacity to do that. So the real question is, what is at the hard core of government approach? When you want to do something dramatically different, a number of things typically go with it. You either have a new personnel, you have a new vision crafted in a way that people see it different from the old order and therefore can bring forth something that people can feel good about. You may not be the most inspiring person speaking about it, but there is a way that the numbers or the direction can hit somebody who is watching, and the person can say, okay, maybe there's something here. Quite frankly, I think that it was too routine for the crisis that we are in. But maybe in rolling out a certain game plan, we might see something different. Right now, there's nothing particular in my experience that suggests that the speech gives us a sense for where we may be traveling other than the old order.
All right, Prof. Well, because Nigerians have always asked Mr. President to actually speak, come out more and interface with Nigerians, I guess, well, it appears the president is beginning to listen to Nigerians. I'm not trying to hold brief for the president now, but why we look at performance, which you have mentioned, if you were to look at the level of performance of this particular administration, especially in 2020, with the presence of the COVID-19 pandemic, the presence of the NSAS protests, what would be your description of the performance of this administration in 2020?
Well, obviously, it varies significantly across the spectrum. There were places where there was a very coordinated effort at getting people to act appropriately in the face of the pandemic. I mean, you can say that Lagos started out pretty well, trying to get people to appreciate the dangers in front of them, trying to put a system in place that can help people to overcome the challenges of the pandemic. After a while, we seem to just kind of lose steam, which is why this second wave that has come back seems to be doing a lot of damage, that we could not stay on message and keep going. And maybe the message was from beginning too elitist in the way it was framed, because even while the first round was going through, if you go to some parts of Lagos, not talk of going out of Lagos, if you travel to some parts of the country, you would not believe it's the same country you were in. But in terms of stimulating economic activity, I think that a lot more could really have been done. I mean, we don't have the kind of fiscal space that a Germany has, for example, that enabled it to stimulate SMEs so stoutly. We made a lot of speeches. Central bank promised a number of things, but let us face it, the nature of the political culture in Nigeria is that the political class is parasitic The political class, tries to capture everything that comes out for the people, so that you will see that whereas there was a lot of talk about what to do to stimulate economic activity, you see how even the palliatives could not be distributed, and how it became the object and the target of the looting that followed the collapse of the NSAS protests when it was interfered with. So performance was very mixed. You cannot say that it was well executed, but you saw the effort that Boss Mustafa and his team were making on a daily basis on TV and all of that. Fair enough, that was a worthwhile effort. But then there were many things that went back and forth that could have been done differently, especially to take advantage of it, to stimulate a new thinking about how the economy grows. That is about production, not about distribution or sharing, as we say in Nigeria. And we didn't manage to take enough advantage of the crisis of 2020 to shift mindsets towards a production-driven economy. That, I think, is the biggest failing of 2020.
Well, stay with us, Professor Patutomi. We will come back with you and continue that conversation, especially as we keep talking about Nigeria's economy. We are still in recession. It does appear that we even fear that the worst may happen this January, according to predictions by the MBS. Let's take this conversation now to the PhD candidate in New Zealand, Wisdom Iyeke Polo. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name, from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Wisdom, I would like to thank you most kindly for agreeing to speak with Galaxy TV. Wisdom, well, for you outside the country, what do you make of the events that even played out in 2020, especially the major events, the NSAS protests, the alleged Lekki shootings, we are in a recession, and then of course the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's begin with an overview of your reaction to these major events in 2020.
Good evening, viewers. Kelly, thank you for having me here. I appreciate that. An overview of 2020, especially about the NSAS protests, I think the government mismanaged it. This was a peaceful protest, and instead of the government to sit and listen to the demands of these protesters, the government decided to stop the protests by force after holding on for a bit. That was very disappointing, especially for those of us outside the country. When people around us see what is happening in our country and begin to ask us, oh, is that the way the government in your country tend to suppress peaceful protests? That is very disappointing. Then the issue of COVID, it's the politicians. I don't know. They take every opportunity. They use every opportunity to money, and you hear the kinds of money they said they have used, and you wonder where these monies have been used. Especially, we know that it has not been as severe. The COVID issue has not been as severe as it has been in Europe, US, and the UK. So how come they're spending so much money? And you see the palliative, they were stored and kept, and people were in need. People are hungry, yet they were stored. Now, because of this, people tend to believe, the Nigerians tend to believe that COVID is political. Those of us outside, we know that this is real. This is real This is real pandemic, but people tend to believe in Nigeria that they are in denial and believe it's political, that politicians are just using this to make money. And that is really sad.
All right, Wisdom, stay with us. Wisdom in New Zealand, University of Auckland, as well as Professor Patrick Itomi here in Lagos. Let's take a breather now. When we come back, we will take a look at, we'll stay with Mr. President's New Year message as we begin to wind down on that particular topic. We will pay close reference to some of the major talking points, especially from the opposition party here in Nigeria, the People's Democratic Party. That in a moment. Stay with us. We're back.
Our focus on revamping the economy through the national economic diversification agenda that supports the primary goal of national food self-sufficiency. This has helped reduce the growing food-related inflationary figures and have in considerable measure positively impacted on our food security status during the long months of the pandemic lockdown. We are also currently rebuilding our national infrastructure base and in the process introducing transformation through the rehabilitation, modernization and expansion of the railway system, national roads and bridges both in rural and urban centers alongside the airports and seaports. The reforms we have put in place in the power sector will guarantee increased efficiency in our drive to significantly expand the generation and distribution of electricity for use in homes and factories. As an administration, we are currently undertaking a series of social interventions designed to boost job creation and support the entrepreneurial drive of our youth.
We're back. This is Firecrackers and we're live from Nigeria's commercial capital here in Lagos. My name is Kelly Egiga, and of course we are focusing on Mr. President's New Year message as we are joined by Professor of Political Economy here in Nigeria, Professor Patrick Utomi, as well as we also have a PhD candidate from the University of Auckland in New Zealand, Wisdom Iyekepolo. Wisdom, let's begin with you now. Mr. President's New Year message, what part of that speech was most striking for you?
Well, the speech is nothing from the usual, and it's he majorly focused on significantly focused on addressing the youth and reassuring the youth that the thrust of his administration is to secure the future, which I doubt the speech particularly did. Then he went ahead to talk about security, also the economy and the anti-corruption drive. I would have expected this kind of speech to give the country or show the country the policy direction of this administration for 2021, but it significantly failed in doing that. It should not just promise the youth of what, or try to reassure the youth without showing what you have done and how this is going to lead to what you'll be doing in the new year. For me, that was a major failure of the speech. But every other thing is usual. I could have also written that without knowing what is happening in Nigeria.
All right, Wisdom. Let's come back here in Lagos now as we begin to wrap things off on this particular topic. Professor Patrick Utomi, let's come back to you because the president addressed some key issues about the economy, as I can see here. He also addressed issues of security, Professor Patrick Utomi, but as it appears, there are reports already about a suspected Boko Haram terrorist abduction of an aid worker and others along the Maiduguri-Damatu road. It does appear that the abductions and kidnappings continue. This is a major crisis at the moment. I mean, it does appear that the kidnap also varies amongst the social class. What do you make of what is played out in terms of insecurity? I mean, can the issues of the economy be addressed when we have issues of insecurity in most parts of the country, especially in the northeast?
Well, first of all, with regard to kidnappings taking place today, yesterday, I don't expect that because a speech was made overnight, everything will be okay. Certainly, what is important is that there's a clear roadmap. Unfortunately for me, I've not seen the roadmap. Something that gives people a new sense that things will be different. Hopefully, it exists somewhere, and we'll be looking forward to seeing it. But there is a clear relationship between a state of security in the country and economic performance. Now, one of the big challenges we have for 2021 is that we may have food shortages in Nigeria. This is because a significant part of the food production belt, the food basket of the country, has been in a situation where most people can't go to their farms, whether it's the middle belt, whether it's up north. And obviously it will begin to show through in terms of food price. It's already showing through in terms of food inflation. That is already a very significant part of the inflationary situation, which has put us in this stagflation, where on the one hand, output is reducing and prices are going up. So we've got a real problem there. How do we tackle this? How do we ensure that the areas that produce food are given enough protection and farmers stimulated enough to be able to return and to produce at levels that can reduce the possibilities of food shortages across the country? This is very, very critical. Also, inputs, agri inputs into manufacturing. Right now, the ports are a complete mess. We've got a huge crisis. Ships are lining up miles into the Atlantic trying to enter Lagos ports. And so people are not getting inputs for manufacturing. And so workers are getting laid off. Now, even when the ships are coming, still trying to overcome the supply chain crisis that COVID-19 triggered because of production stoppages in some parts of the world, in shipping lanes being challenged during the course of 2020 and the COVID crisis. So we've got a number of things that really call for a state of emergency in the economy, that call for extraordinary moves. But I'm not seeing that happening. I mean, literally, where we are with the ports is like where we were in the 1970s when we had what was called a cement armada, and ships were lined up trying to enter Lagos ports for miles. Sometimes they spent 6 months just waiting to berth, and in frustration, they would just dump the cargo in the Atlantic and turn around and leave because they've lost so much money already just waiting to get in Lagos ports. Now we'll begin to return to that. When that happened in the 70s, we created a port decongestion committee. We created a this, that, Alajiba Manga Tukru, all kinds of people we created. But I'm not seeing that kind of response to the current crisis in the ports. So there are many things that we need to deal with differently. we are in a state of emergency. We're in the moral equivalence of war with regard to the economy of this country. And I think that we do need to have, if you will, fire teams that are going about trying to put out these fires if we're going to get traction.
All right, Prof. As we begin to wrap things off now with you, because in fact, as a matter of fact, Galaxy TV made a documentary of the port here in Lagos, and we would continue doing something about that as we make investigations about what exactly is playing out there. But two questions, Prof. Just before I let you go, do you think that this administration has what it takes to turn things around? That's one question. And then in 2021, what key leadership questions should Nigerians begin to ponder on?
You see, every Nigerian administration has what it takes. It can make a deliberate choice not to use what it takes to get things solved. The fundamental problem of Nigeria is state capture. This is systemic political corruption in which those who capture the state essentially orient choice in government, not for the advance of the common good, but for the material and power benefits of those who capture the state. Now, it is state capture that blinds administrations and leads them to nepotistic orientations and not using talent that is available to solve problems. It is state capture that leads to suboptimal choices where they should be made. I mean, we just got out of one really silly one. Some parts of government were shouting that the borders will never be open. Some other parts of government was signing an African free trade, continental free trade agreement. It was like, look, where is this government? Who is the government? What is the direction? So we need to get a clarity in terms of thrust of policy. We need to bring the people to the center of decision making. Unless that can happen, we're going to be, well, as I like to say, all dressed up with nowhere to go.
Professor Patrick Utomi, would like to thank you most kindly for agreeing to speak with Galaxy TV. Professor of Political Economy. He's also the founder and CEO of Center for Values in Leadership. And he also anchors Patito's Gang. Thank you so much for doing so much for Nigeria.
Well, thank God for the privilege.